We encourage you to hit the subscribe button right now so you can listen to more podcasts of Operation Truth. Ladies and gentlemen, we do want to hear from you, so we encourage you to email us directly at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. I want you to know that your messages are likely to be heard, addressed, and listened to on air.
Operation Truth, the show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lou Palumbo. With me today, and as always, it's my co-host, Tom Fuentes. I'm going to get into a lot of things with Tom today, especially in light of the fact that in 2 days is the 60th anniversary of the assassination of President Kennedy, loss of the innocence of this country, and the realization that there was trouble in paradise that we're living with today. Tom has, from a historical perspective, built, I would say, a timeline, starting with the assassination of John Kennedy to present, lending itself to the operation or the mechanism attached to government and certain governmental agencies. But before we get into that and another discussion about the visit of the Chinese president, Xi, to San Francisco, which I think you're going to find this interesting as well. Tom has some interesting information as to those who greeted him. You're going to find that interesting as well. But I want to, of course, start out with this discussion about your borders. You've got to pay attention to this discussion. You know, Tom and I were speaking off camera at one point with the producer, TJ Stone. And there's an interesting dynamic that's attached to this that we've spoken to before. And it's something that every American needs to be aware of, regardless of your political affiliation, your political lens. This is about your country and the future of your children. The first problem is we don't have enough assets to vet the individuals coming into this country. As I've mentioned numerous times, and I say it redundantly so you are aware of something that could be problematic. Simply stated, we have 800,000 law enforcement agents approximately for a population of about 360 million. So we can't vet people coming into this country. A number of reasons. We don't have enough assets. They are changing their names, changing their birth certificates, changing their driver's licenses as we change underwear every day. What we're finding out also, and I'm going to talk to this, especially in regards to New York City, we lack the assets or the ability to assimilate them. Not that we've really ever engaged in that process of assimilating anyone. We seem to compartmentalize, dismiss you, and then hope we don't have to deal with you down the road. And then, of course, you know, this concept of mass deportation has arisen. And once again, we don't have enough assets to do that. You've got to pay attention to this border issue. It's quite interesting. And I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about New York City, which is where I was born and raised. I went to 16 years of Catholic school there, grammar school, high school, college. And I've watched it go through a lot of changes. Some were good, you know, coming into the 90s, for example, under the Giuliani administration, he had the wherewithal to appoint a gentleman by the name of William Bratton as the police commissioner, who is, in my opinion, the quintessential police official, not political. That's one thing commissioner is political. Quintessential police official. The man is brilliant. He's progressive in his thinking. And like myself, he has some liberal tendencies, especially in areas that deal with socially sensitive discussion. City went through like a renaissance. In 2 years, he took the homicide rate from about 2,500 to under 500. And the quality of life just exponentially got better for 25 years prior to the administration of an individual by the name of Bill de Blasio, who took the city into a downward turn that we're living with today. But interestingly enough, with this migration issue, the very same mayor, Eric Adams, who about 14 or 15 months ago stood outside the Port Authority building located on 42nd Street and 8th Avenue, greeting migrants coming off the bus, reminding everyone New York was a sanctuary city and everyone was welcome and we take care of everyone. Suddenly screaming, he's spending about $8 million a day on illegal immigrants. We're feeding them, clothing them, providing them medical care, housing, education. And we actually have run out of room and assets that will enable us to do that. The biggest one, financial. So we now have a hiring freeze in place. something that took place back in 1971, which eventually led to the layoff of about 5,000 police officers around the mid-1970s. Reduction in staff is what he referred to, and he's doing it through attrition. So as people are retiring, we're just not replacing them. And as it is, the roll call showed about 3,000 police officers in the city of New York, and they're talking about bringing the roll call down to as low as 29,000, which will just translate to a less safe city. I remind everyone, on 9/11, we were fortunate enough to have about 41,000 police officers, and we needed every single one of them. Even with that many police officers, we had to depend upon what they refer to as mutual aid. We had police officers from Suffolk County, Westchester, Nassau, New Jersey, southern part of the United States, all over the country came to support, what was necessary in keeping the city safe in anticipation that this might not be a one-off. But we're going to lay police officers off. We're not going to lay police officers off. We're going to just not replace them. And the mayor said, and this is almost a quote, fewer police due to migrant costs. Guys, that's going to resonate through the country. You have to pay attention. It's going to impact everyone. I want to talk real quickly now about these protests. And I received some briefings where they forewarned us that they were going to literally pop up everywhere in the city of New York. And they have. And it makes it that much more difficult for the police to manage them, whether they're at Port Authority building or at the Grand Central Station or at Columbus Circle or any number of places. That is creating overtime. Once again, the question comes down to who's paying for this, which is all tied into the prior discussion about reduction in staff across the board of about 5%, which is a significant number. So we have a problem at the border, guys. And what's so interesting is that, and I spoke with Tom about this and TJ prior to coming on air, I'm really at a loss in not understanding what the federal government doesn't understand about what's taking place. And it isn't just New York City. They're howling in Chicago. They don't want to be a sanctuary city anymore. The minority community there has realized that they're taking assets from them, monies from them, and giving it to people who are illegal in this country when they need it. And that's the beginning. Los Angeles, Karen Bass almost had cardiac arrest when one busload appeared a couple of weeks ago, because she's got a homeless problem there that's just overwhelming. And a lot of that, we have mentally ill people. So I'm trying to figure out what exactly the exercise is here today, ladies and gentlemen. Is it to destroy this country? I mean, have we become the architects of the destruction of this society? I want to say one thing too, so we are clear. We have a minuscule percentage of this country that is destabilizing it, period. The majority of this country is out, like Tom, myself, and everyone that's probably listening to this, worrying about your children, paying your bills, your mortgage, your insurance, your car payments, your utilities, educating and clothing your children. We're preoccupied, we're distracted, and they're capitalizing on this. These are not millions of people. Even when they say 300,000 people converged in New York City, we have 360 million folks. Do the math with me, guys. 300,000 people should not be steering this country. We have a lot of people with too much free time on their hands. That's one thing I'm going to tell you. That also applies to this thing about hate. If you got all this hate in you, you have got too much free time, because most of us are just trying to figure out how to get ourselves through the day and make this place a better place before we leave for our children and our young people. But I want to go into a discussion now about a recent visit of the president of China, Xi, who visited San Francisco, which was like a slum. Actually, a slum is a good definition of what San Francisco was. It was about 2 rungs below that, with human feces, hypodermic needles, people shooting up on the streets, putting businesses out of town. Well, the governor decided, not the mayor, the governor decided he was going to clean it up because he's got a political agenda. Interestingly enough, Tom bumped into something that I think is worth noting, and it has to do with the greeters of President Xi. Tom, could I ask you to expand on my comment?
Sure. We've talked in the past episodes about Chinese social credit system and how that's gradually coming to our country, where you're rated by the government that determines the level of freedom that you would have to take a bus, take a train, take a trip, buy things at the grocery store. Well, anyway, along those lines, a student group made arrangements with the Chinese consulate to be able to provide Chinese flags for them to wave as she went by in the motorcade. Thousands of these. Now, China has 350,000 students here in the US on student visas. And they're here with also the good graces of the Chinese Communist Party. If they have a good social credit score, they can stay in the United States, they can travel. Well, anyway, a student group obtained from the Chinese consulate permission to pay $400,000 per student per flag waiver on the side of the street. Then that group only paid the students $100, so stealing $300 apiece from them. So a number of the students went to the consulate and said, we want to protest. We want this to be known by the government that we were stolen from, that we were supposed to get $400 apiece and we didn't. And they were informed by the employees or the government officials at the consulate, no protest about this. If you do, we could have your social credit score lowered to where you would be revoked from being able to stay in the United States, and or when you get back to China, you will not be allowed to join the Chinese Communist Party. Well, that's a big deal because in China, about 90% of the jobs you could get require membership in the party. So as a result, if they can't join the party and they can't get jobs and their social credit score is lowered to the point where even in China, they can't travel or buy groceries or any of those things, that's what's going to happen. So suddenly the students decided, you know what, $100 a piece is great. Thank you very much. So they were basically coerced into accepting that and knowing that the student management of the student group was basically stealing $300 a piece from every one of the people on the sidewalk waving those flags.
You know, Tom, I only have one question. Did they let them keep the flags? Did they have to return them?
Well, they could deliver them in person. I think those flags are all made in China, including American flags are all made in China.
Seems like we have a lot of things made in this country that come from China, which begs the question, how did this come about? And why aren't we proactively trying to balance this out, guys? I mean, we're at the point where our technology is almost solely dependent upon China. What's your thoughts on that, Tom?
Well, you know, going back to 9/11, there was such a demand to buy American flags by Americans that the company that makes those flags, which is basically an entire town in China, had to go on 3 shifts a day and hire more workers in order to make American flags to satisfy the American market. So China, you know, does a lot in terms of that, makes things that we want and that we don't make ourselves.
The change from currency systems to fully digital cashless societies has intensified fear around the world. In mid-September, Wells Fargo and Truist banks planned major layoffs as an impending 2024 recession has been predicted by many economists. Many analysts are predicting silver will hit an all-time high in 2024. That's why you need to own silver as a hedge. Green energy demand will possibly turbocharge silver prices to $50, $100, even $300 an ounce, according to many experts around the world. Silver is a proven hedge against inflation. Since 1971, silver has returned over 11% when averaged yearly. Hard Asset Management is a trusted leader in precious metals and rare coins for nearly 40 years. We have the guaranteed lowest prices, fast and easy ordering, expedited shipping, with award-winning customer service available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. CST, Monday through Friday. So protect yourself from the chaos. Invest in stability with Hard Asset Management. Call now and get your free Hard Asset Management information kit on how easy it is for you to own silver. 844-426-4653. Free delivery and extra silver with every $10,000 bought. Use promo code 007.
Guys, I want to brush on to another topic because aside from Tom being a former assistant director of the FBI and running their FBI operations internationally, among other things, he's an historian and a rather good one. And I'm not pandering to Tom, but I'm always thrilled to talk to this guy because I learned something from him. You know, Tom, in 2 days is the anniversary of the assassination of President Kennedy. Interestingly enough, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a special on the History Channel covering the Kennedy years that I encourage everyone to try to watch because if you really wrap your arms around this man and how he became the president, something that seems to be lacking across the board almost today, and he did it in almost every capacity. He was quite an interesting individual, charismatic, articulate, very clear in his thinking. And something I want to bring up that I wanted to make sure I didn't forget to say. You know, we got into this Cold War issue with the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union at one point detonated a nuclear device that was, I think, like 40 or 400 times more devastating than the ones that were dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And President Kennedy, a Democrat, ordered our nuclear program to step it up so that we would not be on the short side of this stick, something that's a real departure from the way we do things today. I want to say something to you guys so we're clear. Tom and I aren't here as Republicans, and we're not here as Democrats. If any of you question the amount of dedication and devotion Tom's had towards this country, you're just cuckoo. You know, he has lived to keep this country safe. And I would tell you this, he, among others, I know there's another gentleman Tom's very fond of, Chris Schwecker. If these guys are running the FBI today, it would be straightened out in about 20 minutes. Unfortunately, we have to roll through an administration, and I don't find any comfort in saying this, that seems to be very misguided, to put it to you politely. I talk about the borders. That's only one issue. Guys, look at your major cities. There's a new trend going on. Apparently, they're driving into stores now with vehicles. I guess it makes it that much more user-friendly for them to fleece them. On another topic, for those that haven't picked this up, there was a gentleman returning home, and you could tell from the video, he had a gate to his house. And as he pulled his car in, got out of his car, he was holding a cup of something, don't know what it was. A couple of gentlemen hopped the fence, guns drawn, and proceeded to approach him, at which point he withdrew a concealed weapon that he legally possessed in the state of California, issued by, I understand, the county of Los Angeles, and engaged them. And what subsequently has happened from there is they have revoked his concealed weapons permit. I'm not quite sure what they don't understand what they're doing here today. This is the wrong message to send to everyone. To the people in California, I just have one thing to say to you. If you're happy with your economy, vote for the political entity that promotes that economy. If you're happy with the impunity under which the criminal element operates in your cities, be it San Francisco or Manhattan Beach, California, which I am intimately knowledgeable of, I once resided there, or the city of Los Angeles or San Diego or any number of these other jurisdictions, and vote for the political mechanism that supports that. I don't know what to say to everyone. If you're content with this foreign policy of ours, where we're pouring over $115 billion into the Ukraine and we're not taking care of our own people, continue to vote for that political mechanism. We're not here really to tell you who to vote for. We're here to give you food for thought. You have enough of these knuckleheads in this 24-hour news cycle that are trying to convince you that whatever they think is right on point. That just simply isn't the case. I've said to you before, I'm going to say it to you again. Our approach to this is not to spoon feed you. We don't want to spoon feed you. We want you to think. We want you to put down your political lens, love your children more than your politics, and understand the direction this country is going. If you're content with the price of groceries, support it. I don't know what to say, guys. We're spending more money than we make. And I have to be honest with you, the Republicans are a party to this as well, just for the record. But I want to go back and bump into this Kennedy assassination. It's really disturbing for me in particular, because I went to 16 years of Catholic school, and I don't know how, but I had this propensity to have Irish Catholic nuns who were teaching me. Sister Sean Maureen, actual name. Sister Martin Maureen was her actual name, and across the board. So we were spoon-fed the president. Thank God we were, because it gave us some insight into what a real leader looked like, independent of politics. He was a conservative Democrat. I wish some of the Democrats today would open up their history books and examine who this man was. And I heard all about his philandering or cheating. I don't really care about that. What you do in your personal life, as I've said a million times over, is your business. Whatever arrangement you have with your wife, whatever your wife is prepared to tolerate, I don't care. And I don't want to hear about it. Same thing with your lifestyle choices. If you find comfort with a man and you're a man, I'm happy for you. If you're a woman with a woman, I'm happy for you. I have no issue with transgender people. I have a fix for the transgender issue. We'll give you your own sporting events, your own bathrooms, anything that supports your lifestyle. We seem to have the ability to do that in this country when we want to. We're the fly in the ointment appears is when you go near our children. And it doesn't matter who you are. I don't want my neighbors talking to my children. If my children do something wrong, you come to me, I parent, not the schools, not people with alternate lifestyles, cultures, etc. Very simple discussion. This is not that complicated, guys. A lot of this is common sense, which is a concept that has left this discussion in totality. Common sense, logic, reason, civility, decency, respect. Find those words for me today, which bumps me into the media. And I'm going to come to Tom because I know Tom has his own perspective about the media, but they're at the root of your problem, guys. I warned you before. They create your narrative and your optic. They decide what it is you're going to hear and when you're going to hear it. And the slant that's going to be attached to a topic or an issue. That's what's wrong here today, guys. Don't they understand what they're doing to this country? This is so confounding. It's so simplistic. Or are they making so much money that they just don't care because they live in a bubble that you don't live in, where they can hire armed people like myself? It's what I do for a living also, guys. I protect people. Go look at my resume. It even astonishes me how successful I've been unintentionally. I was just skipping along trying to give people not just what they paid for, but more than that, because we live in a society where every time you turn around, somebody's got your hand in your pocket and they're shortchanging you. My whole philosophy in doing business was different. And I also run my security details, something other owners don't seem to understand the importance of. In any case, I want to get into this Kennedy thing. I don't mean to keep bouncing around, guys, but know this. Every topic I bounce into intersects with this one common denominator, the future of our young people, our children, which we are just squandering away. And I don't understand why we can't throw the brakes on. Are we so hateful? Is there so much animosity in this country that you're prepared to sacrifice your children to carry out your agenda? Simple question. And I don't care who you are, Republican, Democrat. I wonder what would happen in this country if we stopped talking for like 5 days. Everybody just stopped talking and let everything kind of calm down. Even yourself, those who are promoting these agendas, these things I hear elected officials say are alarming. I don't understand how you can be an elected official and spew anti-Semitism or hate or call for the destruction of a sovereign nation, which, by the way, happens to be a cornerstone to our safety and security. I'm referring to Israel. I'm talking about Tlaib. I don't get this. She was brought into this country. She's not born here. My attitude with her is very simple. And Omar and anyone else, take your citizenship away and go back to these countries that you have this attachment to. If you don't support this country and its agenda, what are you doing here? Or is this exercise to subvert what this country represents? Because that's what you're doing. Tell me who it benefits when we have 1,000 people or 10,000 people parade through our streets, disrupting traffic, blocking vehicular traffic, which lends itself to potentially saving someone's life who's having a heart attack or a child struck by an auto. You promote this? You think that this is going to be productive? Do you really believe protesting every day in New York City or through cities across this country is going to change our foreign policy? It isn't. And if you think it's going to change Israel's, boy, are you misled. How people didn't understand what the response from Israel would be to an incident that was carried out by Hamas perplexes me. The Israelis never misrepresent who they are. They don't fool around. They're this little strip of land in the middle of the Middle East, the only Western representation of politics. And at the end of the day, they're going to do whatever they need to do to preserve themselves. And our greatest fear today should be this word called escalation. It's eventual. If Iran gets a bomb, rest assured, Israel will go after them, and so will we. And I want to be clear about something so there's no misconception here. The reason that Israel is so viable is because this country supports it. If we pull our support, they're in big trouble. By the way, they contribute a lot to our intelligence community, because while we're worried about rules and, agendas and creating all of these relationships with Germany and Italy and France and England, they don't care. They don't care about these coalitions. They do what they need to do to preserve their country. Something maybe we should do, and I'm not saying go absolutely haywire. At some point in time, there's got to be some method to the madness. Now I'm going to go back to the Kennedy assassination. I finished bouncing you guys around like a basketball. But remember this, everything we talk about on this show intersects with this country, its future, and your children. So, Tom, I want to go back to this Kennedy assassination, of which you are very well versed in. Just so you guys are aware, Tom provided us some tremendous insight as to what's actually taken place in this country after President Kennedy was murdered and how it resonates through this country as far as its credibility and how he operates. So, Tom, I want to bang into this conversation of John Kennedy. Give me some of your thoughts on what you think happened. And I do want to say one thing, guys. One of my clients has been a gentleman by the name of Michael Franzese. He was a capo in the Colombo crime family. His father is Sonny Franzese, who was the underboss. And Michael will tell you unequivocally, organized crime was a party to that. Based on that statement, Tom, who else potentially could have been contributors?
Well, probably, Lou, it's pretty clear that the CIA had a lot to do with this, and the deep state, the military-industrial complex. There were a number of players that stood to gain by the assassination of President Kennedy, by the coup, basically, of overthrowing his presidency by killing him. Now, this goes back a couple of years. It just didn't all come about at the time he was killed in 1963. You had him, when he comes into office in 1960, the plan had already been put in motion to invade the Bay of Pigs, a beach on the island of Cuba, with the idea that Cuban refugees taught and trained by the CIA in South Florida would invade this island, and the local Cubans would rise up to support the Bay of Pigs invasion to help overthrow Fidel Castro and the Castro regime. Well, they land on the island. That doesn't happen. And the other side of that was that the CIA, and Alan Dulles was the head of the agency at the time, promised Kennedy that they had everything in place to support this invasion and for it to be successful. They didn't need U.S. warships or U.S. military interference or any of that kind of assistance. So the invasion happens. It's a disaster. The invaders are getting slaughtered on the beach and or captured to be put in jail. And Dulles and the CIA asked the Kennedy administration, okay, we need U.S. military, we need jets, we need ships, we need all of this. And Kennedy says, no, we don't want the rest of the world to see the U.S. being responsible for the invasion of Cuba. And you said it wouldn't be necessary, that you had all the arrangements in place to keep the U.S. out of it, or at least appearing to be out of it, or to have plausible deniability that the U.S. was not behind the Bay of Pigs. So that starts a really contentious period between the CIA and President Kennedy. Now, in 1962, we have the Cuban Missile Crisis, and all of these military leaders are trying to convince Kennedy, invade Cuba. Don't let them build these missiles from Russia that are nuclear armed and all of that. We can take them right now. Now, later it's learned, years later, that the Cubans already had tactical nuclear weapons on the island, which could have, our soldiers would have been met with at the beach with nukes. And that would have been totally unexpected on our part. So anyway, this relationship between Kennedy and the CIA has become very, very contentious by the end of 1962. So now, in 1963, Kennedy issues a memo that he wants to withdraw the 15,000 military advisors in South Vietnam, bring them home by the end of 64. And the military is looking at that, wait a minute, we don't want to do that. So now he's angering the military-industrial complex by not giving them a cash cow to make millions and millions of dollars in Vietnam, which they later do over the next 11 years. Then you have the American Mafia. And Michael Franzese, a capo in the Colombo family, and I was at FBI headquarters working in the organized crime section, working on cases involving the Colombo and the other 4 New York families of La Cosa Nostra. The Mafia was approached by John F. Kennedy's father prior to the 1960 election, where he said to them, if you help my son get elected, so basically steal some votes in Chicago, which they do, and in mining areas of West Virginia, which they also do. And it was enough in that narrow of an election to help Kennedy be elected. Now, the promise is made that if he comes into office, your worries are going to be over. He's not going to go after you like you think. He's going to be, make it easier for you to do business. Then what happens is Kennedy betrays the mafia twice. One is he appoints his brother, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s father, now who's running for office, but Bobby Kennedy, he appoints him as Attorney General. And Bobby Kennedy hates La Cosa Nostra, the American mafia. He goes after them tooth and nail, establishes a strike force system, and basically the Kennedy administration reneges on that promise. And then Kennedy, the president, commits the second fatal error, is that he begins having an affair with Giancana's girlfriend, Judith Campbell, later Judith Campbell Exner from Nevada. Now, in the mafia, their code of rules, let's say, is you do not mess around with the boss's wife. You do not mess around with the boss's mistress. And so here's John F. Kennedy sleeping with her in the White House in the daytime. She climbs on a plane, flies to Chicago, and she's with Sam Giancana in the evening. And Giancana is well aware that she's been with Kennedy in the White House during the day. So that's the second cause for the mafia to participate in his assassination. Now, later, the FBI intercepts conversations where the three main bosses that hated the Kennedy, Giancana in Chicago, Carlos Marcello in New Orleans, Santo Trafficante in Tampa, the bosses of those three groups. And they're having phone conversations intercepted by the FBI where one of them is saying, we've got to kill Bobby Kennedy. This is ridiculous. And Marcello, by the way, Bobby Kennedy has Marcello picked up off the streets of New Orleans in full dress clothes and dress shoes, fly him to the jungles of Guatemala, where they let him go in the middle of the jungle, figuring, now we won't hear from this guy anymore. And then what happens? Carlos Marcello winds up back in New Orleans. So now Marcello, Trafficante, and Giancana are having discussions of, we got to kill Bobby Kennedy. And one of them suggests to the other, if you kill Bobby Kennedy, the president will assign 10,000 FBI agents to investigate us and we'll be out of business. However, if you kill the president, the next day, Bobby is just one more unemployed lawyer in Washington. So that starts the idea that even the mafia will be involved in helping in this. So now you've got all of these different groups, not necessarily tightly conspiring, but in agreement that President Kennedy has to go. They basically agree, we need a coup in this United States to get rid of him. And then that's what basically transpires. Johnson takes over the presidency. And by the way, I forgot that Allen Dulles, the head of the CIA, was fired by John F. Kennedy. He hated Kennedy. Kennedy made a promise before he was killed that he was going to blow the CIA into 1,000 bits and blow them in the wind. He hated the CIA. He didn't trust them. He didn't trust Allen Dulles, so he fires Dulles. Well, now after he's assassinated and the Warren Commission is created, they put Allen Dulles in charge of the investigation, who his main job was then make sure he protected the CIA from any allegations or reports that might link the CIA to being part of the plot, part of the coup plot.
Rare coin prices have exploded in the last 3 years. Hard Asset Management, one of the world's largest precious metals and rare coin dealer firms, makes recommendations on what to buy for collectors who know what they're looking for. We maintain one of the world's largest rare coin inventories for individuals seeking to diversify precious metals and rare coins. We can make strong recommendations in areas that we feel have the strongest potential for long-term growth. Call today, 844-426-4653 to receive our free rare coin newsletter, or register online at bmcham.com. Free delivery and extra silver with every $10,000 bought. Use promo code 007.
Tom, you mentioned something from the outset of this conversation. You alluded immediately into what they call a military-industrial complex. And I think prior to this conversation and prior to that assassination, it's a concept that we really never dealt with before. And I have a feeling it's resonated since that day right through current times. Would you agree with that, Tom? Isn't that a lot of what's attempting to steer the ship here? And I want to say one other thing, Tom, and I'm curious to hear your opinion of what I say. It would appear, based on that incident on November 22nd, 1963, that we had a demographic in this country, an element in this country that was actually trying to steer this ship. And by that ship, I meant this country. And that was the intelligence community, or CIA. What are your thoughts on that, Tom?
Well, we were warned about all of this by President Eisenhower. His last month in office before John F. Kennedy is sworn in, January of 1961, Eisenhower gives a speech, and he basically says, as a former military general that ran our operations in Europe in World War II, and all of his 8 years as the president, he issues a warning: beware of the military-industrial complex. Now, his original speech, he had military-industrial congressional complex, and his advisors said, wait, you have a law that's pending in Congress. You don't want to make them angry, so take congressional out. So he gives the speech, beware of the military-industrial complex and the money that they have to bring about the policies that they want. Now, an example is that Kennedy, as I mentioned, in October of '63, issues a memo ordering out our military advisors to leave Vietnam. And as soon as he's assassinated, and a matter of fact, the weekend of his assassination, President Johnson rescinds the order. No, we're not pulling out. And then he begins the escalation with the total support of the military and how much money they're going to make out of this deal. So now, in 1964, we are not leaving Vietnam. We're putting in more and more and more troops, to the point where by 68 or so, we have 500,000 troops in Vietnam, more than 500,000. And by the time we leave, in 1975, we will have been in Vietnam basically in a military presence 10 years. The military is making a fortune on how much we're doing in Vietnam. And that was all enabled by the Kennedy assassination.
Tom, let me ask you this, buddy. Is it true that the French withdrew from Vietnam in 1956, and that was the first time we started to provide advisors? Is that an accurate statement?
Not sure the exact date of their departure with our advisors, but President Kennedy, when he was a senator, United States Senator Kennedy, met with the French and met with French military leaders who said, we're in a quagmire in Vietnam. We can't win. And don't you even think about going into Vietnam, because you won't win. It's going to be impossible. So the French, having lost many soldiers and many battles there, finally decided we're out. And it's interesting, the French withdraw from Vietnam, much like, and then in 1965, basically withdrawing from Algeria, similar circumstance. They had military presence, Southeast Asia, as well as in Northwest Africa. And basically all of those situations basically failing. And they warned Kennedy as a senator, you don't want to get caught up in this. Don't bury yourself in the affairs of South Vietnam. You're not going to win. And Kennedy never forgot that. So when he's president, he's waiting for what information is coming from these advisors. And he becomes increasingly convinced we just have to get our advisors out and stay out. And that's unacceptable to the military.
I want to ask you this question, Tom, and I've never asked you this privately or in any type of environment such as this. What was your, you and I you're a day older than I am, ironically. What's your opinion of the Kennedy administration, John Kennedy as a president? I've never asked you that before, and I've been pretty vocal about expressing how I felt about him. What were your feelings towards him, Tom, in retrospect?
Well, his ideas were, in some ways, very different than what the mainstream government wanted. Putting Bobby Kennedy to go after the mafia, that's basically unheard of. The other administrations basically held hearings and all of that. And in the early 1960s, Bobby Kennedy forms a very strong effort to go after the mafia, creating the Office of Strike Force Attorneys in about the top 10 or 11 cities where the mafia is dominant in the United States. And his assistant in all of that was a professor that later went to Notre Dame and wrote the RICO statute, which was passed in 1970. Basically, racketeer, influenced, and corrupt organizations. It was designed to go after American La Cosa Nostra. So in those terms, Kennedy, was doing well with those ideas, but he had ideas that the military and the agency regarded as radical. We're not going to enter into peace talks with the Soviet Union. We're not going to have nuclear disarmament or test ban treaties or that type of thing, which Kennedy was basically advocating, that we start doing that we start dialing down the mutually assured destruction between the Soviet Union and the United States with the number of nuclear weapons that each country had that could wipe out the world 2-3 times over. So in that sense, he had the right idea to go after those kind of issues. So, he didn't get that far, basically.
I've always had this impression of President Kennedy as a leader who galvanized this country. From what I could come away with, this country was enamored with him, which almost made him too powerful in one regard. And so was the world. I mean, the amount of outcry after his assassination globally was just overwhelming based on what's been reported in the credible news. And I don't want to go off on a tangent about the news and credibility because we've surrendered that. But back then, I mean, it was pretty obvious as how well received this individual was. And I said earlier when we opened up, I wish some of the elected officials today would take a good hard look at this individual and listen to the way he spoke, to the topics he spoke to and how he spoke about them and how he addressed America. And I do remind you all of something that I constantly tell you guys. We may have overpopulated this country. The population at the time John Kennedy was president was about 180 million. We've doubled it. And as population growth occurred, so problems exponentially occurred with it, again, without going off on a tangent about the increase in mental health problems in this country or any number of other issues. That's just something that, that I observed about his administration. The more I listened to him speak and to the issues and the topics that he spoke to, the more impressed I've become with this individual. And it's so interesting because he had all the earmarks of someone that might not take this job that serious. And I watched him grow into this job. He became the president. And the last individual prior to that I really thought had it going on as a president was Ronald Reagan. And I can comfortably say that because in his reelection, he won 49 of the 50 states, which speaks volumes of how the country perceived him. We just don't have that today. We have a lot of division today. I want to go back to this discussion about military-industrial complex, which in my opinion, far too often drives the conversation of this country. Tom, would you say that's the issue as well, in your opinion?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The goal of the military-industrial complex isn't like World War II. We don't fight wars to win. In World War II, Pearl Harbor happens December 1941. We don't go on the offense, really. We do the bombing of Tokyo, which was just a pinprick to show them we could. But in May of 42 is when World War II really begins for us, and that's the Battle of Midway. By the end of the summer 1945, a little over 3 years later, we defeat the Japanese, and during a couple of months earlier, we defeat the Germans. And after Pearl Harbor, by the way, we didn't declare war on Germany. Germany declared war on us. Hitler declared war on the United States 3 days after Pearl Harbor. So now that whole war, where we have 12 million military men and women in uniform and win the whole thing in 3 years, unheard of. We lose 250,000 dead in the war, Asia and in the European theater. Now, Vietnam, that war, we're in Vietnam. The advisors in 62, 63, 64, the soldiers start arriving 64, 65, and we build up to where we have 500,000 soldiers in Vietnam, and we don't leave until April 1975, when the helicopters are taking people off the roof of the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. So we're there 10 years. We lose 7,000 or 8,000 dead in Vietnam. But meantime, to the happiness of the military, they make $1 trillion on the Vietnam War. The money just keeps rolling in. We don't really want to win. We probably could not win. Didn't matter. It was a cash cow. And later, we've seen that with Afghanistan. We've seen it in Iraq. We see it now, the Ukraine. We're seeing situations where the military is going to make a fortune, and they pay it back in campaign contributions to the senators that support them in that war effort. And they're just happy to keep making money. They don't want to win, because that would end the cash cow. If they win, the flow of money to them is over. So they just want to do enough to keep the war going to make a fortune, and they do. And that's kind of been the policy, I think. This is my opinion. I think since the end of World War II, I think World War II was the last war that we, sent people from the country, go win this war. Civil school teachers and accountants and farmers and everybody else that joined the military, go win. Go defeat the Germans, go defeat the Japanese, and then we'll bring you home and it's over. And that's what happened. So 12 million. Now, what do we have today? 350,000 soldiers in the military. It's pathetic. And we can't even keep up recruiting, because the military now has gone so woke that people don't want to join, and really good qualified young soldiers who would be future leaders and generals are leaving. They don't want to stay in the military because they can't compete with, the transgender person that's going to win the next promotion, or, somebody else that's going to take the next job, because the military, like many other agencies in the federal government, is no longer a meritocracy. You're going to win on the battlefield, you'll get promoted on the battlefield. Now, what color's your skin? What sex are you? Are you married to someone in the same sex? Are you transgender? All of these issues kick in now that have nothing to do with, are you the most competent person to have that job and to win the war? That's been put aside. So that's why the military can't recruit enough. Now, just recently, this past week, the military announces that they fired so many people because they refused to get the COVID vaccine. And so they were kicked out of the military. Now they're kind of asking them, well, come on back in. We need you. So that's interesting now. People that didn't get the vaccine because they were convinced it was not healthy, which, by the way, looks like they were right. But, that's going on now, that the military has gotten desperate. Then with studies that have just come out that said that of the people in the military, 70% do not meet the physical standards. They're overweight, they're out of shape, but they're in the Army or Navy or Air Force, whatever. So you have all of these issues with how the military has been mismanaged up to the present time. Now that has to be turned around.
Tom, there's a couple of comments or observations that I'd like to contribute to this. We bumped into this word after the Kennedy assassination. We call it convoluted. That's one thing we started to understand about this country as a result of this murder, how convoluted everything is in the country. Something else, and I hear about troop strength. We have 350,000 Americans. I don't know how many people in this country feel, but this is how I feel. The days of sending our children to foreign countries, some of whom hate us, to be slaughtered, come back in body bags, emotionally or physically dismembered, are over. Guys, you want to know why we don't have a military? We don't trust the government anymore. The agenda is wrong. And by the way, guys, we have so much technology today, it's never necessary for us to put another boot on the ground. Trust me when I tell you. We have capabilities that would astonish you, that we like to keep hidden from the public, for some good cause, to be very honest with you. I just don't buy into this thing about sending our children into foreign countries. My attitude is build an army. And I know there's an issue with the operation of the military on our soil because of Pase Comitatus, but independent of that, we should have a military in case we have a foreign invader. I'm not worried about foreign invaders in other countries like the Ukraine. And thank God the Ukraine isn't a NATO nation, because we'd probably be in deeper than we are right now. And we're in plenty deep right now. And this is another form of a proxy war for this country that once again is feeding the military industrial complex. All these little toys and trinkets that we're sending them there to starve off the Russians are being built by companies in this country. Lockheed Martin, Grumman, all of the tech companies today. I mean, this is just absolutely ridiculous what we're living in the country today. And I'm not against fighting to defend the country. I'm just a little adverse to sending our children into these foreign situations where they come back either in body bags or in pieces, emotionally and physically. One problem that we're facing today in the country is that the American public, in my opinion, appears to be a little too trusting. You know, we vote certain elected officials in, and we somehow operate under this misnomer that they're going to represent your best interest. That just isn't so. And Tom touched on that before. He mentioned this military-industrial complex. They'll turn around and support or contribute money to senators or congressmen that promote their agendas, that fuel their fire, so to speak. Guys, pay attention to your country. It's slipping through our fingers. And really, these are fixable problems, whether it's the borders, the crime in your major cities, your foreign policies, this economy, this whole discussion with the energy sector as well. This is all very misleading. For whatever reason, we had this ill-conceived notion of shutting down the Keystone Pipeline the first or second day into office here, which is why you're paying twice for gasoline that you were. Just look at California, which is mind-boggling. If you go out there, guys, you can see the rigs in the Pacific. I guess they're drawing up oil, and they're paying $6 and $7 a gallon. In some parts of Northern California, the gasoline was over $9 a gallon for regular gas. Pay attention. I know you're distracted, but you've got to be part of this conversation. And I want to remind everyone of something. Tom and I are kind of set in many ways, career-wise. You know, we've realized what we have been able to accomplish, and you know, we have pensions and we're both eligible for Social Security. And Tom and I both have businesses that are kind of doing okay. You know, we're doing this because this country needs to course correct, and we're trying to become part of it. I'm not running for office, guys. It sometimes probably sounds to you like I am, because a lot of people come and say to me, why don't you run for office? Because I can't sign on to either one of these agendas. I don't want their money that bad. I don't want, you know, I have to tell you, I've spent an enormous amount of my lifetime trying to stay off the radar screen. And I made a mistake in the early 90s, starting to do interviews. And I think the first ones I did were around the shooting with Malvo and Williams in Washington, D.C. and some of the suburbs in Virginia. If I'd realized that I would be on the internet after that, boy, I would have avoided that like the plague. It just happened that way. But guys, we're doing this because we have a purpose. We're hoping to broaden this platform. We want to create a network, an offset to Fox, MSNBC, and CNN. We want to tell you the truth. We want to educate you. We don't want to lead you around by the nose. That's not the exercise here. But we don't, you know, I don't mince words, as you can tell. I've always been this way. I don't like being contentious. It's not something that's positive. I've been contentious a good part of my life. It got me beat up pretty good. I'm just going to tell you that. I've got my bumps and my bruises, and I learned from them. We're trying to convince the American public you have an option other than the ones that you're being exposed to. I do want to just mention something. Today is the president's 81st birthday. I wish the guy happy birthday, independent of what he's done to our country in 3 years, which has almost made it unrecognizable. Whether he's a Republican or Democrat, that statement remains the same. It's irrefutable. We are in a crisis here, ladies and gentlemen. I'll tell you something you're going to find interesting that was mentioned before. Tom can affirm this. FBI agents, Secret Service agents, ATF agents, DEA agents, U.S. Customs agents, all of the above, Homeland Security, 57 years old, mandatory retirement. The New York State Police, 58 years old, mandatory retirement. The New York City Police Department, you hit your 63rd birthday, you're aged out. Guys, please pay attention here. There is a complete generational disconnect between the people that are trying to run this country today and the majority of this country. And by the majority, I'm talking about our young children. I'm not sure they're even the majority by number, but one thing I can tell you unequivocally is they're the future of this country. We need to create some type of bridge of communication because there's something missing here. And I know what the answer to it is. We stopped parenting. We started parenting with technology, cell phones, laptops, you know, iPads. As long as you weren't breaking our bananas and you were quiet in the house, we let you do whatever you want when we didn't supervise you, period. We've destroyed every institution that they need to believe in, starting with government, the media. You've destroyed the credibility of our law enforcement agencies, local policing, our FBI, our quintessential investigative arm, the FBI. We're destroying and bastardizing our judicial system. If you really want to see something alarming, and I'm not telling you this because it's Donald Trump, it's like the circuses in town in New York City. I'm looking at this judge, independent of Donald Trump, and it's shameful. There's no other way to say it. We are better than this. I'm listening to Letitia James, the Attorney General of the state of New York, whose opening statement was, I'm going to go after Trump. Guys, Trump's been there for decades. Where have you been? Every time we've turned around and we couldn't get a project completed regarding construction, whether it was Woolman Skating Rink or the west side of Manhattan near the rail yards, which is 72nd Street South, along the Hudson, they call it Riverside Boulevard, it went to Donald Trump. Ahead of schedule, under budget. I heard he doesn't pay people. Guys, if I told you how many people that high up in the food chain didn't pay properly, your head would spin. And I can't give you too much information because I don't want to destroy my business in totality. It's a practice that's associated with big corporate America. Donald Trump is nothing different. Let me tell you something else you're going to find interesting about this guy. And I'm not promoting Donald Trump. Let me be clear, because we needed to send him to finishing school. This lack of demeanor really disturbs me because our children are watching, and I'm trying to teach my children the opposite of everything he demonstrates and others in government, like Tlaib and Omar and the rest of these knuckleheads. But if you travel south along Riverside Boulevard, they paid to put his name on their porte-cochere, Trump. That's no lie. That's a fact. Now it's all been taken down because he lost popularity after 2016 because of his lack of demeanor, his lack of dignity. I don't know what to say to this guy. I know he is, though. He's a New Yorker. He's a street fighting guy, and he knows the system because he's part of it. He intimately understands all of our faults and where the weaknesses are and how convoluted we are and how you get things done. Guys, this isn't the world of academia. This is the real world. That's something I constantly remind people. College educations are critically important. I had the benefit of getting one. So did Tom. So will my children. I encourage you to do that. But the answers to living every day aren't in books. It's in common sense. It's in logic. It's in reason. It's in learning how to converse with civility, decency, and respect. All of, as I said earlier in this broadcast, have left the conversation, guys. We want to give you something different here. And by the way, if we misspeak, don't be shy about telling us. If we are disrespectful, don't be shy about reminding us. We're not trying to be contentious. You almost can't not fall into that rabbit hole, though, because we're just immersed in contention today. I want to say something else to you about the conduct of our elected officials, both sides of the aisle, okay? Jamal Bowman pulled a fire alarm to disrupt a vote regarding the shutdown of the government financially. Nothing was done. Miss Tlaib, first or second day, and guys, be prepared to censor this, that this man was elected, Trump, I'm going to impeach that motherfucker. That came out of her mouth. She should have been gone the next day. That is not who we are. We are better than this. Oh, what are you afraid because you're going to be considered anti-female, Islamophobic? We're so worried about being labeled. We surrendered our conscience, guys. Grow some bananas here. Let's take this country in a different direction. We're going to wrap it today now that my blood pressure's up once again. Tom, I thank you as always. Don't laugh, Tom. It's not funny.
Thank you.
And we're going to be back for the next episode. We're going to bump into some discussions about this little pitfall the Republicans keep bumping into called pro-choice. Guys, you better put your thinking cap on here if you ever plan on winning an election again. I also want to talk about this intelligence failure with Israel. There's something not right here. Tom and I have spoken about that before. I did mention just a second ago about this abortion issue. Boy, is this a hotbed. Things are being driven emotionally here. I hope we don't surrender a country over this issue. But I do tell the Republicans something, and we're going to talk about it the next episode. You better get your thinking cap on that area and also about you jamming down your religious beliefs down our throats. Guys, thank you for joining us today. Tom, I thank you as always for your wisdom, your insight, your professionalism. And this has been Operation Truth. You can reach us at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. I encourage you to become part of this conversation. We're not doing this because we want to be on a podcast. Guys, trust me when I tell you, I've got skin in the game. So do you. We'll see you next time.